My parents cut me out of the family for 10 years, then they needed $200. Oh, my parents kicked me out when I was 20-1. For 10 years. They never called, not on my birthdays, not on holidays, not even when I started my own business. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, I opened my front door and found them standing there, smiling, like nothing had happened, like they hadn't erased me from their lives for an entire decade. And after 10 years of silence, they wanted $200,000. What happened next taught me something about family I'll never forget. Growing up, my older brother Jason was the golden child. If Jason got into trouble, someone else was blamed. If Jason failed, someone else was responsible. If Jason made a mistake, my parents found a way to excuse it, and Jason never apologized, not once. Not even on the day everything fell apart. Meanwhile, I was expected to be responsible. The easy child, the understanding child, the one who never caused problems. For years, I convinced myself that was normal. It wasn't. Everything exploded when I was 21. I had spent years saving money to start a business. Nothing glamorous. Just a small online company I hoped could someday support me. I worked nights, skipped vacations, lived on the bare minimum. Every spare dollar went into that dream. Then one evening, my parents called a family meeting. The moment I walked into the living room, I knew something was wrong. Jason sat on the couch staring at the floor. My mother looked worried. My father looked angry. And then they told me Jason had accumulated nearly $40,000 in debt, credit cards, personal loans, bad decisions, years of them. My parents wanted me to hand over every dollar I'd saved, every penny. To bail him out. I actually thought they were joking. They weren't. I looked at Jason. He didn't look embarrassed. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't even say sorry. He just sat there waiting, like my savings already belonged to him. For the first time in my life, I said no. The room went silent. My mother's eyes widened. My father stood up immediately. The argument lasted for hours. They called me selfish, unreasonable, ungrateful. I kept saying the same thing. No. Eventually, my father pointed toward the door. If money matters more than family, then leave. I remember waiting for my mother to stop him, waiting for Jason to say something, waiting for anyone to choose me. Nobody did. So I packed the suitcases, walked out the front door. And left. The years that followed weren't easy. There were setbacks. Mistakes. Long nights. But I kept going. Because failure wasn't an option anymore. The business my parents told me wasn't worth risking family over. By the time I was 29, it had crossed its first $1 million in revenue. The same dream they told me to abandon became the reason I never had to ask anyone for help again. A few years later, I bought my first home, built a life I was proud of. And eventually stopped wondering why my family never called, because some questions stop mattering when you finally accept the answer. Then came that Tuesday morning. I opened my front door and nearly dropped my coffee. My parents were standing there. 10 years older. 10 years quieter. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my mother smiled. "Can we come in?" I already knew this wasn't a social visit. People don't disappear for 10 years and suddenly show up for coffee. We sat in my living room. The small talk lasted less than 5 minutes. Then my father got to the point. Jason was in trouble. Again. This time it was much worse. A failed business, massive debt. Legal problems, the amount they needed, $200,000. I almost laughed. 10 years. 10 years of silence. And somehow we had ended up exactly where we started. Jason needed money. My mother leaned forward. He's your brother. The same words, the same guilt, the same pressure. Just 10 years later, I asked a simple question. Why didn't you call when I bought my first house? Silence. Why didn't you call when my company crossed $1 million? More silence. Why didn't you call on my birthdays? Nothing, because we all knew the truth. They hadn't come because they missed me. They came because they needed me. Then my father said something I'll never forget. Family helps family. For a second, I just stared at him. Then I smiled. Not because it was funny, because of the irony. 10 years earlier, I'd needed family to and they'd chosen Jason. Every single time I walked to a bookshelf and picked up an old photograph. One of the last family pictures taken before I left. I handed it to them. Do you remember this? My mother nodded. I pointed at my younger self in the picture. That's the son who needed his family. Neither of them said a word. Finally, I gave them my answer. No. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked stunned. You're really turning your back on your brother. I shook my head. Then I looked him straight in the no. I learned that from you. The room became completely silent. A few weeks later, I learned that Jason had filed for bankruptcy. The $200,000 wouldn't have saved him anyway. Years of bad decisions had finally caught up with him. Not long after that, my parents sold their house to help him. The same house where I'd grown up. The same house where they told me to leave and never come back. I didn't try to stop them because that was their choice, just like it had been their choice 10 years earlier. 4 years? They chose Jason. This time, they chose him again. And that was their right. As for me, I went home, made myself a cup of coffee, opened my laptop. And got back to work. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just peace. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn someone's approval. I wasn't trying to prove my worth. Wasn't waiting for my family to choose me. And for the first time, even though I was completely alone, I felt whole. My parents told me to leave when I was 20-1. What they never expected was that one day I'd stop waiting for them to come back. And when they finally did, I no longer needed them. Because some doors close for a reason. And sometimes walking through them is the best thing that ever happens to you.